Thank you for joining us for the latest episode of the Secure Connections podcast. This channel focus series is brought to you by IoTSSA, the Internet of Things Security Services Association. As always, I'm your host, Brian Sherman, Content Director at IoTSSA and Get Channeled. And joining me today is Doug Hazelman, VP of Technical Marketing for CloudBerry MSP. Doug has more than 20 years experience in the IT industry and served as an executive team member of Veeam for 10 years, spearheading the company's community and technical evangelist efforts and providing product strategy insight. Doug has also held a variety of management positions at other tech companies throughout his career. Welcome back to the Secure Connections podcast, Doug. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Brian. Good to be back.
Great. Well, it's been a few months since our last podcast together, so just like to check in. How was your summer, first of all?
So the summer was hot. I live in Florida, so that's to be expected. Didn't do too much exciting, mostly because we've been working on flipping a house. So want to get that all complete. The good news is that closes on Friday, so it will be flipped, and then we'll have some more free time after that. So hopefully next summer will be a little bit more exciting.
So trying to balance the day work with the, I won't say less mental work, but the physical work, it can be challenging, but it's different. It's different.
Yes.
Great. Well, best of luck in selling the house and
thanks.
Hopefully reaping some profit for your labor.
Yes.
That's always the challenge. But let's talk about a topic that's been on everyone's mind the last couple of weeks. You mentioned you live in Florida, and Hurricane Florence has been big in the news. Disaster preparedness is obviously one of the things that's top of people's mind, especially in the channel. First off, we extend our thoughts to those affected by the recent storm. It killed at least, I think as of the update I got today, 14 people, left a path of destruction throughout Carolinas and Virginia, hundreds of thousands of businesses and millions of homes without power. Starting to see some of it coming back on, which is great, but the officials project the total damage costs probably to exceed $50 billion. It's just mind-numbing to think about the numbers. But Doug, unfortunately, nothing reinforces the need for MSPs to put a priority on their clients' business continuity plans, like widespread storm such as Florence. For MSPs with customers affected by the hurricane that have operational backup plans and systems in place, what's their first step in recovery?
Well, I mean, first step is just to make sure everyone's okay.
Sure.
And with all the flooding that's going on now, it may be a while before, these businesses can get back up and running. But I think for the MSPs who were prepared beforehand and with their customers who are already using mostly cloud-based services, it makes it easier for them to get back online as long as they, have a laptop and an internet connection. It does make it easier for them to get back online. And hopefully from a disaster perspective, because of the flooding, the equipment itself can be replaced, but the data, really needs to be somewhere not flooded, like a cloud, so to speak. So, I think what we're going to see, over the next couple of weeks is as, the floodwaters start to go down and things start to, power starts to come back on, you're going to see MSPs working with their customers to, either get them back online in the same place they were if they weren't that affected that much, or they're going to be working with them on a plan to, hey, let's spin this stuff up in the cloud. Let's get you back and working, even though your office, may have been damaged or uninhabitable. But we can at least get your business back online and processing orders or whatever it is that they do. And I think you always, as an MSP, you always need to kind of have that consideration in mind is, we're talking about, a hurricane now with massive flooding afterwards, but, it could be as simple as a fire that takes out, the building that the customer inhabits. And, that's just as destructive. It's not as widespread. But you always need to kind of plan for what happens if that site all of a sudden is not available from the customer perspective, and how do you get them back online and working?
Right. Now from a perspective of, looking at even our country, 50 states, there's probably 10, maybe a guesstimate of mine that are usually affected or could be affected by like a hurricane, for example. Mm-hmm. But with the weather forecasts and things that we have today, they can look at anywhere from 10 days out to get some sort of idea of where it's coming in. Do you find that, within the last 2 or 3 days, if it looks like a disaster is coming, you can't look at earthquakes and things like that, but a hurricane, do you find that MSPs and just businesses are really trying to amp up and cross their T's and dot their I's the last minute? Are you seeing new solutions being implemented just to try to handle this?
If you live in a hurricane prone area like Florida or the Carolinas, you want to be prepared before there's a named storm heading towards you.
Sure.
10 days out may not be enough time to get everything in place that needs to be. So, if you're in a place where that these types of disasters are likely to happen, you need to be prepared. And then you use that forecast when, the storm's heading this way to really, make your customers feel safe that, look, it's okay. All your data is safe. We've got it up in the cloud. Your services are going to be okay. For your computers and your equipment, get them to high ground, or even if it's just putting them on a desk, within the office in case the office floods, those types of things. You just want to walk them through that type of stuff. But in terms of that disaster, you should definitely be prepared way before there's a named storm headed your way.
Excellent advice. So basically, it sounds like it's a good time to review the systems that are in place, just kind of tweak the last minute things and do a lot of last minute preparation.
Yeah, and
I guess is the thing.
Yeah, and the thing is, hurricanes get the most attention because they're so widespread. It's such a large area, and so they get a lot of attention in terms of disaster preparedness. But fire does not discriminate. There were wildfires out in in the West Coast earlier this year. They're probably still going on. There's flooding can happen anywhere. I know like Wisconsin had some really bad floods, a month or so ago.
Certainly.
Something can happen anywhere. So even though we talk about these hurricanes and places that are more prone to these types of disasters because it's so widespread, you need to be prepared no matter where you live, no matter where you're at. It's just anything can happen, and I think. But what storms do for customers that aren't in hurricane-prone areas is say, look, yes, we don't live in a hurricane area, we're not going to get hit, but that doesn't mean another disaster can't happen. And you still want to be prepared no matter what. So you can still use this as an example to tell your customers, look, I know it's going to cost a little bit more, but I really think we should do A, B, and C to make sure that if something does happen, that that we're going to be ready. And just kind of point out, hey, it could be anything. It's really an insurance policy at the end of the day. You hope it never happens. You hope nothing ever happens. But at the end of the day, you want that insurance policy, so to speak, to make sure that your data is going to be safe and available after the disaster or after what happens.
Makes perfect sense. And I know it's nice to have that extra time of a couple days to do that. But as you mentioned, many disasters just happen very quickly where they don't have that amount of time. The other thing I hear frequently is many MSPs I know are very somewhat happy about having additional compliance measures that are requiring backup a BDR solution testing, because it makes their job easier where they have to do that because they know when they get to where there's disaster, those things are already done.
Yeah.
They just maybe need to do some last minute preparations, but 95 or 99% of it's done. So
yeah,
it's the good side of compliance, I guess.
As frustrating as it may be sometimes, but yeah, there is a good side.
True. So now that the storm has passed many of the areas, getting up. What's the biggest challenges for businesses to get back up and running? Say they have lost data or have lost some of their systems. And what do you find is the biggest challenge?
The biggest challenge is just figuring out. Okay, first, what is missing? What can't we operate? Right now. And coming up with a plan to say, okay, now how do we get that back, and how do we get things online? And like I said, it may be that they have to move to a temporary office somewhere because their old office was flooded and they can't go there. It's condemned, whatever. So it's really just kind of assess where we're at now. Floodwaters are going down, but we need to assess what we're missing, what we need to get back up and running. and then come up with a quick plan to get things back online. And if you hadn't already prepared for it, if you didn't already have your data offsite, then it's going to be much more difficult than to say, oh look, all we need is all we need is a server that we can restore this to, pull it down from the cloud, do the restore, and we'll have you back up and running in this temporary space.
Right. Well, and I know in a lot of cases right now, they're making sure, as you mentioned before, the people are okay, the community is doing well, and then it's time to get back to business. So we're still kind of even ahead of that curve from what I've seen in reports today. But what types of support does CloudBerry provide in these instances?
Well, I mean, our support staff is ready, willing, and able to help out in terms of if anyone's having any types of issues and getting things back online. So we are definitely there for our customers, for our MSPs, that may be experiencing any types of issues. So definitely, if you're having a problem or something's not working, reach out to us and we'll get it back up and running. The fact that we don't own the cloud data centers, that we the MSP chooses the cloud and the services that they want to use, does make it a little bit easier, because we don't have to worry so much about our data centers, right? And those types of things. So it's kind of a little bit of a different model than what some others do that have their own data centers, where we kind of rely on the MSPs, choosing the storage option and the cloud option that works best for them.
Makes perfect sense. So how should providers use these type of catastrophic events to highlight the need for business continuity solutions without looking opportunistic? Obviously, we talked about before, the people element. There's a lot of other concerns other than selling BDR at this point. But how can they, when everything is fixed, leverage this properly, put it in the right framework to say, we need to make sure that you're covered?
Yeah, well, see, I think from an opportunistic standpoint, you obviously don't want to be targeting the Carolinas, right? let them get things sorted out. But if you're not in the Carolinas or Virginia or places that have been affected, you can use this just like people used Hurricane Harvey last year, Hurricane Irma that came through Florida, just to remind folks that, look, disasters happen. And, we want to make sure that you're prepared. It may not be a disaster like Harvey, Irma, Florence, but, there still is a need. And, you don't want to be, the person on the news being saved by a helicopter because you refuse to evacuate. I mean, that's kind of the extreme example from a person standpoint. But think of it from your data standpoint is, do you want your data to all of a sudden not be, to get burned up or flooded or whatever, and not have access to it? So, I think it's, in the backup industry and in BDR, we talk about the 3-2-1 rule. You want 3 copies of your data, 2 different media, one of them offsite. And offsite far enough away that it's not going to be affected by something that happens on, within the city or the geographic area. So it's just all that more importance to kind of stress that, for MSPs to stress that to their customers, the importance of, hey, we need to do this. We need to get things offsite so that if something does happen, like a Florence, like a Harvey, like an Irma, that we can take care of you.
Do you find, and those are great points, Doug, do you find that with remote work these days is it seems like everybody does something from home, especially executive teams now, they're becoming more mobile, more flexible with the workspace. Do you think that's kind of helping reinforce the point that your data should be available everywhere and needs to be replicated in the cloud? Is it helping to sell that the cloud discussion?
Oh, I definitely think so. I mean, I don't recall the last time I had to VPN somewhere to get access to my data. Right? It's
right.
Where you're using Office 365, G Suite, those types of things for your email and file share and stuff. So a lot of the data is already offsite and in the cloud. And as you said, if you have a virtual workforce, a lot of times, the applications they use on a day-to-day basis are cloud-based. So the data is already offsite, and you just need something then to connect to the web, to connect to that service to log in and use it. So there's not that too much of a risk. I think where the risk comes in a lot of times is in line of business applications, especially those that require an on-site server or on-site data that aren't running in the cloud. Sometimes that can be a concern, is what kind of line of business applications do you have that aren't able to be run from from the cloud, where people have to come into the office to use them, and those could be very widely depending on what types of industries you focus on. But definitely, in a lot of the MSPs I talk to, they are pushing their customers to cloud services as much as possible, just because it makes things so much easier. If all you have to support are desktops and those servers, you don't have to support an email server, you don't have to support a file server, those types of things. It just makes it that much easier. And like you said, and then if someone's laptop dies, hopefully you have a backup of any data that was on it, but it's easy just to replace it, and get it back up and running very quickly.
Yeah, I think you still see the cloud transformation too, where email servers now, or everybody's going to cloud email.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing when it comes to a variety of applications, including VoIP. They're not managing their own VoIP anymore. Hosted
Mm-hmm.
VoIP is really growing quickly. So it seems like everybody will be a lot more portable, but also the business itself will be more portable. But the access to data will always be there.
Yeah.
So very good. Business continuity is much like any organizational goal. It begins with a plan.
Mm-hmm.
What role should MSPs play in developing their clients' BDR strategies to help minimize, the business interruptions if disasters like Florence come their way?
Well, I mean, any MSP anywhere, if they're providing BDR services, they need to have a plan to make sure that their customer knows what that plan is. And there's different. I'm a firm believer that there's not just one plan, that you have kind of multiple plans for different types of scenarios, right? You might have one plan for loss of internet connectivity. What do you do in that type of situation? Do you fail over to LTE, wireless services and those types of things? That might be important for customers, like for call centers and those types of things. And then there's kind of the disaster, right? Something, it's up in smoke. Now what do we do? And you need to know exactly the steps that you're going to take to get that customer back online. And the customer needs to understand what those steps are well before that the event or the disaster happens. It's peace of mind, not only for you, but it's also peace of mind for the customer. Because if a customer calls you up, when the storm's coming 2 days away and they don't know what their disaster recovery plan is, then you haven't done your job in making sure to communicate to your customers, to make sure that you have a plan in place for when something happens, when something catastrophic. So it's hugely important. Just like it's basic documentation. At the end of the day, is okay. Here's the steps we're going to take in the event that A happens, B happens, C happens, or D, the big disaster happens.
Very good. The other question I have would be similar to having a variety of locations too, right? If a business has like 3
Mm-hmm.
or 4 locations, everything may not happen all at the same time in those locations.
Correct.
Do they individualize the plans for each business, location, facility, et cetera?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's going to depend on, are there services in each location that the other locations depend on? And what happens if that location is down? Are they replicating services between them? So there's a whole host of things. In a multi-office situation, it becomes a little bit different. Again, just because if something happens to Office A, can Office B still continue, and can the people from Office A go to Office B and work uninterrupted? Have you set that up so that there is that continuity, and you don't have an issue in kind of losing an office? It's kind of like setting up a RAID array for your hard drives, right? You can pull a drive out and everything keeps working. You want to make sure, hey, if we lose an office in a multi-office situation, can the rest of the office still continue to work?
So you may have options and then sub options beyond those, depending on what
exactly.
the scenario is.
Yes,
makes perfect sense.
And you may not be able to plan for every scenario, but you need to plan for the common scenarios and communicate that with your customer and say, look, here's the disaster recovery plan, here's the business continuity plan, here's the things we've kind of planned for, and here's the steps that will be taken. And do you see any other scenarios that we might have missed that concern you that we should plan for? Right. So it's a two-way street. It's not just, hey, I'm your MSP. I got you covered. You really need to be a collaborative effort to say, well, are there any things we didn't think about that may, that concern you that you want to make sure we're protected from?
Makes sense, and be flexible for when those things pop up that weren't in that
exactly.
plan. Yeah, great. So while BDR, I think we all realize is an essential business element today. And if those that don't, hopefully are very far and few between, but it obviously still has to be affordable. And that's the one objection, we still hear. What's the best way for partners to overcome the cloud storage pricing objection?
Shop around.
That's a good point.
That's kind of, that's my first thing. And it's kind of, if all you care about is price, then, you're going to go with the cheapest option no matter what. Mm-hmm. But, if you want to look at, features and price and do some comparisons, then, it gets a little bit more difficult to pick the best one. You kind of have to decide, which lever is the most important. If it's price, then you're going to end up with a certain set. If it's, something else, then you're going to end up with a different set of prices as important. But I think, from my perspective, there is that idea of choice. And, I think what also happens is, some MSPs, they go all in on one cloud provider. And they say, well, we're going to use this cloud provider for everyone. Well, what if someone else has some different requirements that cloud doesn't provide? So I think being able to say, oh, look, for these types of customers, we're going to use this cloud service. For these types of customers, we're going to use that cloud service. And for the ones that are price sensitive, don't care about anything else, we'll use this service. And you can find, cloud storage, you can find cloud options, that meet all of these different criteria. But, you shouldn't kind of be stuck into one, so to speak, if you've got different requirements across customers.
And I had a discussion with an MSP a couple of weeks ago about the same discussion. Is they were moving their client over to cloud storage because they weren't looking necessarily at the hidden costs of having servers located in like 3 different facilities that were geographically diverse. Because even if they're maintaining them and looking, when they priced it all out, it was much cheaper to go to cloud storage, even though when they look at that monthly cost, it looked like more than they were paying now. But the reality was it was much more cost effective.
Yeah.
When you put the whole plan together, and there are no hidden costs. If you have a disaster, you have to buy new servers, you have to buy all of this other stuff. Even though they may be insured, there's still all of those hidden costs that you don't get when you have that set monthly price.
Exactly.
Great. And that's another point too, is, I think back like a decade ago, there were so many SMBs in particular that were skeptical of cloud storage options. From security, performance, were probably 2 of the big concerns. That no longer seems to be the case. What, in your opinion, has changed in the last 10 years?
I think it's just, that's where everything's going, right? If you look at smartphones, you have to know that your smartphone, very little is actually on your phone. Everything that you're getting is from a cloud service somewhere. So it's kind of like, oh, wow, yeah, I don't run I run an application on my phone, but the application accesses data that's in the cloud. It pulls it down over the network. If I can't get to the network, there's not much I can do on my phone. So I think that kind of has helped to people to understand about, the power of cloud services. And then, the fact that, so many other companies are going in, big companies are placing big bets on the cloud. With the rise of Amazon and Microsoft Azure, you've got these now very big, essentially well-trusted entities that are using cloud-based services. And I think a lot of times people will point out, well, I just read the story where this bank, they had all their data in the cloud and they got hacked. Well, if you actually read into the story, it wasn't because of the cloud provider. It was because someone at the quote unquote bank misconfigured something and let people in to get access to the data.
Sure.
So, and I think people realize that. I think, at least the smart ones, if you're a good CIO, CTO, you read between the lines, you don't just read the headline, and you understand, what the issue was. So I think that's led to a lot more trust in cloud. As long as you trust the people who are managing the data that's in the cloud.
Yeah, I think several of the research studies have shown that anywhere between 60 to 95% of the security issues that happen in the cloud are because of people mistakes.
Yes,
be
and
misconfigured, or it's social engineering too, where
yeah.
they provide access and poor password protection, and yeah, a lot of it has nothing to do with the actual cloud. It just has to do with the way it was configured. To your point. Very good. So, what partner resources are available to help MSPs prepare their clients for potential disasters?
So, I'm going to go kind of, we don't really have a whole bunch of, slick, glossy brochures that we hand out to our MSPs, but we do maintain a very good set of information, instructions on our blog. If you look at our blog, it's not just CloudBerry this, CloudBerry that. It's, things like how to prepare for a disaster, things you need to know, what's this disaster recovery planning and testing best practices. So, if you just go to our website, cloudberrylab.com, you go to our blog and type in disaster plan, you'll find a number of very helpful articles that will kind of, get you started to understand, what's going on. And then, of course, there's the technology behind it, to make sure that everything is set up and running, and then you can test it and make sure that you can recover things when need be. So, there's a lot of good resources there on the blog.
Very good. Yeah, it's always nice to have that personal information there that walks you right through it, as well as, I think you mentioned the slick glossies. I think that's kind of going the way of,
yeah,
that's kind of going the way. I mean, there's some people that still like to have those maybe as a handoff to their clients, but more MSPs will create those if they're needed. Then we'll rely on those. So great information.
And we are working on a kind of a content library for MSPs. Things like presentations and those types of things that they can use to then take to their customers, as here's why you need cloud backup. Here's why you need this, to make it easier for the MSPs to, sell it to the customers, I guess, or to, just provide some background information. So content library is something that we are working on.
Excellent. Well, great. Well, as always, we run out of time much too quick whenever we're having these conversations. So before we sign off, though, any final thoughts you'd like to share with the Secure Connections audience?
Well, just like the Boy Scouts, always be prepared. I can't stress that enough. That to say, a disaster can happen any day, any time, when you least expect it, and there's no time like now to make sure that you're ready for the bad things to happen. And, so that way you can sleep well at night, knowing that if something does happen, you'll be able to get back up and running as soon as possible because you had a plan.
Very good. And one thing I'll leave too is I know organizations like CompTIA are doing an excellent match for their members too. So anybody who'd like to contribute to disaster funds, take a look around too if you're an MSP that or someone listening here that would like to donate. Check around, and there's many charities that will make sure that the money gets to the people who need it. So and a lot of them will match. So I recommend that.
Yeah, when I opened my Gmail this morning, and there was a thing at the top saying, "Do you want to contribute to disaster relief for Hurricane Florence?" So I thought it was great.
Yeah, it's cool. We can do a lot of great things today in a short amount of time, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So on behalf of IOTA, I'd like to thank you for listening and encourage you to check out all the great channel exclusive cybersecurity content on the association's website. We would like to thank Doug Hazelman with CloudBerry MSP for joining us today, and wish you a phenomenal day. Thanks again.
All right. Thanks, Brian.